Am I the butthole for calling my sister-in-law a racist after she compared my cooking to making kung pao chicken? For context, I have been married to my wife for about 10 years, and we are a mixed-race couple. I am Asian and she is Caucasian. I have gotten along with her family, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law. But I always felt like her father-in-law and other sister-in-law, Sarah, never liked me. I am a professionally trained chef with over 15 years of experience, and I work at a high-end Chinese restaurant, a spin-off of a popular one in Beijing, in a large United States city. My crew and I have won several awards, and I have been explicitly told I will be the next executive chef. Sarah is also a professionally trained chef and works at a popular upscale French restaurant in the city. She constantly brags about it and, no joke, compares herself out loud to Ramsay and Borden. Whenever I am at my mother-in-law and father-in-law's house and helping out in the kitchen, Sarah is always criticizing everything I do. Whether it is chopping, braising, marinating, etc., she always butts in with comments like, I think you should actually do X like this. I have been patient for my wife and sidestepping those comments, saying things like, thanks, but I think I will stick to the way I do it. Her relentless critiques, always tinged with a patronizing tone, have become a common and exhausting occurrence. Things came to a head 2 weeks ago when my wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I were in her parents' kitchen prepping dinner for my mother-in-law's birthday. We were running a bit behind, so things were heated, which I kind of like because it reminded me of work, and that is when Sarah walked in. She took one look at what I was doing, scoffed, and said something like, "Oh wow, okay, so that is not the right way of doing things." It hit a nerve, and I pretty sternly told her to stop criticizing my cooking and that I'm also a chef like her. She laughed and said, "Making kung pao chicken at some Chinese restaurant does not count." The kitchen went silent. Father-in-law snorted, chuckled, and my mother-in-law yelled, "Sarah, what is wrong with you?" I stopped what I was doing, swore at her, and called her a racist piece of garbage, apologized to my mother-in-law for not being able to stay, and left for home with my wife. The air was thick with tension, and the silence that followed was deafening. My wife stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and hurt. My father-in-law, instead of stepping in to defuse the situation, let out a snort of laughter, as if Sarah's insult was somehow justified. My mother-in-law, however, was not having it. "Sarah, what is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice shaking with anger. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my hands trembling with rage. I stopped what I was doing, turned to Sarah, and swore at her, calling her a racist piece of garbage. I then turned to my mother-in-law, apologized for not being able to stay, and stormed out of the house with my wife trailing behind me. As we walked to the car, my wife was silent, but I could see the turmoil in her eyes. "I cannot believe she said that," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "Why does she always have to ruin everything?" I had no answers, only a deep-seated frustration that seemed to have no outlet. Apparently, this caused a massive fight after we left, with my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and other sister-in-law taking my side, and my father-in-law and Sarah saying it was a joke, but kind of true, and that I was being too sensitive. The extended family somehow got wind of this, and now everyone is arguing and taking sides, with my wife even getting texts from some of her cousins apologizing for Sarah's behavior. Despite being on my side, my wife is begging me to apologize so that the fighting will stop. But I refuse to, because screw Sarah and her blatant racism. The following days were a whirlwind of phone calls and messages. My wife's phone buzzed incessantly with texts from family members, each one taking a side and adding fuel to the already raging fire. My wife, torn between her love for her family and her support for me, pleaded with me to apologize. "Just apologize," she said, her voice weary. "It will make things easier." But how could I apologize for something I did not do wrong? How could I let Sarah get away with such blatant racism? "I cannot just let this go," I told her, my voice firm. "She needs to understand that her words have consequences." My wife sighed, looking defeated. "I know," she said softly, "but this is tearing the family apart." For clarification, my wife has also informed me that now Sarah may be in trouble at work, and she is blaming me for it. Apparently, one of her coworkers heard her rant about what happened and reported it to management. Sarah is blaming me, though my wife is partly blaming me. The news that Sarah might be in trouble at work did not surprise me, but the intensity of her reaction did. She called my wife, her voice shrill and panicked. "Do you know what you have done?" she screamed. "I am being demoted because of your husband. This is all his fault." My wife, usually calm and collected, snapped, "This is not his fault, Sarah. You brought this on yourself." So it looks like one of my wife's cousins found this post and put it on Sarah's Facebook wall, going, "This is you, right?" Her Facebook friends are starting to comment with things like, "If this is you, Sarah, then I am disappointed." I think Sarah is still at work. Stuff might be hitting the fan soon, and now my wife is upset too. We'll try to update, but might have to delete the post if things go nuclear. I was considering removing it, but I just got a voicemail from my father-in-law that my presence was only being tolerated up until this point, and threatened a world of hurt if I did not delete this post. I'm officially going to keep this post up, and if you are still reading this, Doug, I'm very disappointed in you. You are better than this. I will also continue to update, and thanks again for all your support, folks. The voicemail from my father-in-law was a new low. His voice was cold and menacing, a stark contrast to the man I had known for years. "Your presence was only being tolerated up until this point," he growled. "Delete the post or face a world of hurt." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was not just about Sarah anymore. It was about power and control. Lots of stuff just went down. My wife got a call from Sarah, from my wife's paraphrasing. Sarah started screaming, crying at her the moment my wife picked up, and said that she just got demoted because of her Asian slur husband. Apparently, some of her coworkers have her on Facebook and showed the post to management, which, combined with her earlier rant, double whammied her back to being a line cook. And now she might get fired. My wife told her to go jump in a lake and is now solidly on my side after taking the verbal abuse from Sarah and reading some of the comments here. My wife is still the opposite of happy, though. My wife called my mother-in-law and asked her what was going on with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law was confused, so my wife played back the voicemail I had on my phone. And apparently my mother-in-law literally just walked away from the phone without hanging up and started yelling at my father-in-law. The Facebook post has now devolved into a cluster flame war with family and friends jumping in. Comments ranged from disbelief to outright condemnation of Sarah's behavior. Some family members were vehemently defending her, claiming it was just a joke taken out of context, while others were appalled and disgusted by her words. My wife, scrolling through the comments, grew increasingly frustrated. "I cannot believe they are defending her," she muttered, her fingers tapping furiously on her phone. As the Facebook war raged on, the true extent of the family's divisions became apparent. Long-held resentments and political differences surfaced, turning the online argument into a battleground. My wife and I watched in dismay as relationships crumbled before our eyes. "This is tearing the family apart," she said, echoing her earlier fears. "Suffice it to say, it has officially gone nuclear. I think I am going to have to call this a day, and we'll make an update post when the dust settles. Thanks again, folks. I would like to clarify that I got my wife and mother-in-law's permissions to post this update, out of respect for them and their privacy. Suffice it to say, it has been kind of nuts this past week." My wife and I had to turn off social media for a bit because of the storm caused by her cousin putting my last post on Sarah's Facebook page. Some people even tried to call the restaurant I work at to get me fired as retribution. But luckily, everyone there is 100% on my side. Or as my boss put it, forget Sarah. Forget those racists. Forget them so much. I guess it did not help them that half the calls involved threats, screaming, and more racial slurs. The calls to my workplace were the final straw. Strangers, emboldened by anonymity, hurled insults and threats at my colleagues and me. My boss, a stern but fair man, stood by me. "We will not let these racists win," he declared. "You have our full support." His words were a balm to my frayed nerves, but the stress of the situation weighed heavily on me. We did not hear any updates from her family, even though we assumed the mess met the fan after my mother-in-law found out about my father-in-law's threatening voicemail. Still disappointed in you, Doug. But that changed on Sunday night when my mother-in-law suddenly showed up at our door with overnight bags. After we took a moment to help unpack and calm down, she spilled the beans on everything. My mother-in-law's arrival was unexpected and alarming. Her face was drawn and her eyes were red from crying. "I cannot stay there anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "Doug has lost his mind." She explained how their marriage had been strained for years, the tension exacerbated by political differences, and Doug's increasing hostility. The Kung Pao incident had been the breaking point. Apparently, my mother-in-law and father-in-law were already having trouble in their marriage, and it was only made worse with a certain 2016 presidential election. She is a Democrat, and he had apparently gone more far-right since then. It seems that a line was crossed with the Kung Pao incident and his voicemail. When he refused to apologize for anything, typical Doug, she asked for a divorce, and he went berserk. She did not feel safe there, so that is when she came over. The other brother-in-law and sister-in-law live out of town. Her recounting of the events was harrowing. "He refused to apologize," she said, her voice breaking. "When I told him I wanted a divorce, he went berserk. I have never seen him like that before. I had to leave for my own safety." My wife and I exchanged worried glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. You may have been able to tell already, but the extended family was largely arguing/fighting/divided along political lines for a few years now, and my cousin's Facebook post was likely just the light to set off the powder keg. According to my mother-in-law, the fallout has allegedly already led to some breakups, excommunication of some family members, and even an argument that ended with police involvement. I have not verified this myself, though. According to my mother-in-law, Sarah came over to her place on Friday. The writing was on the wall, and she was basically forced to quit. Despite her trying to start from scratch as a line cook, the entire staff turned against her. Nothing was coming back from the pit for her, and she was getting the cold shoulder. She is a great chef, I will admit this is true. But they took no chances since it turns out, believe it or not, they are partly owned by a Chinese investment company. I found this hard to believe and did not want to add this detail, but it turned out to be true after some research. I will not say any further for privacy. Word also got around in the local industry, and Sarah is essentially blacklisted from high-end establishments. She is now considering selling her home and moving to find work. As much as I do not like her and found her behavior horrifying, I did not intend for this to happen. So I have reached out to some buddies in other states to see if they had any openings. Whether or not she wants to take it is up to her. And no, she has not apologized for anything either. But I still want to be a decent person to her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of drama and emotion. The family, once held together by thin threads of politeness and obligation, was now torn apart by accusations and resentment. My wife, caught in the middle, struggled to find her footing amidst the chaos. "I never thought it would come to this," she said one night, her voice filled with sorrow. "I just wanted us all to get along." It sure as heck does not feel like a happy ending. Perhaps bittersweet justice. But that is all I can give you. Thank you all for your support and for reading. Thank you for joining us today on ReadItSlash. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating tales. Check out our other videos for more Reddit stories that will keep you entertained. See you next time.